Okay, hello everyone. I think you can see the topic of my talk on the screen. There are a lot of correlation rules written for well-known and widely used sources, but sometimes an SOC can find out an unusual, undocumented source of attack. In this case, you need to analyze the architecture, you need to analyze the sector of attack, and create the response architecture. But what happens if there are dozens of such undocumented attacks? We don't monitor them until we find out about them. What's to be done? I'm an SOC analyst of external projects at Kaspersky Labs. I detect attacks and train other analysts. Another external projects architect was instrumental in putting together this presentation. So the basic idea is to land the SOC best practices on real premises of a customer. This is the basic information behind this slide deck. The fundamental approach is very well known. When you decide to monitor a source, you create rules, audit rules, you start to generate logs, and so on. However, this is a too cumbersome and slow approach if the system that's attacking you is unknown and undocumented. You have to find out more about it. And we suggest an approach in which you cover almost 80% of the tactics in 20% of the time. It is based on a hypothesis that we don't know anything about the attacking system. We are relying on the users, settings, and networks. And actually, we suggest a uniform approach to non-uniform, undocumented sources. Just don't do the face palms, okay? We know all about this attack matrix. We're only interested in the tactics that work only if we don't know anything about the attacking system. An unknown system can be scanned. If they are reconnoitering, it can be monitored, whichever tactics they use. Initial access. A system may already have valid accounts with valid passwords, and this tactic would be quite relevant. Now, execution. Considering that our hypothesis is that the system is unknown, how to detect the execution? Well, so far we don't know how to detect the execution. So, if you want to dig into the system, a malactor may create their own account or misusing the privileges. If, for example, there is an administrator with specific rights in the system, the bad actor would need to try to escalate. And if we want to look at the possible expansion of attack, the system may change the logging rules or may attempt to switch off the monitoring of some internal systems. And access to valid accounts. This will rarely happen, but a bad actor may want to understand which other accounts may be vulnerable and actually try to get access to them from inside. Detection. Considering again that we don't know anything about the system, we actually do not use this tactic because we don't know, we can't say in advance which tactics they're going to use. Lateral movement. I don't think we can detect moving into a neighboring system even with similar credentials.
то, естественно,
Collection.
хранит какую-то важную информацию,
Well,
сбор этой
if your system has been breached,
с целью злоумышленника, либо
they do it for a reason.
ну,
So either you already store some valuable information, or they want to
исполнение
actually
релевантно, если
persist in the system and try to
например, отключить.
expand their use.
Эксфильтрация.
Command control,
Ну,
they may try to kind of switch off or
мы сможем
stop an important component. Exfiltration, here you can actually detect them exfiltrating. And impact.
скажем,
Getting back to old settings
действие, но оно
is
вполне
a specific action, but it is quite likely to be used in such an attack.
представлено на слайде, как вы поняли.
So this is the first correlation rule, brute force.
Изначально предполагалось писать в сигма-виде, но мы не знаем, какой event ID, и полное сигма-правило не помещается.
So of course the full sigma rule will not even get into the slide because we don't know who is attacking, and the thresholds need to be identified individually.
Когда запрофилирована
In my practice, I remember
учетную запись с комментарием «Ответственный не умеет писать скрипты».
that there was a profile of brute force with a comment. The guys responsible for this just doesn't know how to write scripts. A lot of things can happen.
Если
Password spraying.
учетная запись на вашей legacy-системе
If the account
сотрудника
in your legacy system
с каким-то стандартным
is created with a standard password for a new employee, they don't even know about it and don't change their password, password spraying may well work. Sharing credentials.
старается с этим бороться.
InfoSec, they try to prevent users from sharing credentials because this is formally a breach, and no one but one person should know the password.
Несколько правил, то есть мы
And here we
и через них мы
suggest several rules. We create dynamic lists and monitor successful and unsuccessful attempts to log into the system.
предлагаемое правило корреляции — это вход
Number 4. Users first log on. This is an interesting rule.
у атакующих и у красной команды зачастую
The red team
необходимых доступов они не могут
and the attacker, they may not have the
источник
rights of access,
ну, и
and they can't
базоваться на
obfuscate the
мы как защищающая
entry point.
систему хотя бы немного знаем.
And we as defenders, we are in a position to know the rules of first logon. They don't.
И бруты
So this is how we detect actually brute forces and password sprays when they come from an unknown address. And if this is done on first logon, we understand that it is most likely illegitimate.
и профилировать его
Of course, there will be a lot of false positives,
какое-то время.
and it would take some time to profile the rule
Предлагаемое правило
before it actually learns.
ошибок.
Next correlation, many errors types. So a lot of different types of errors.
Опять же, система
That may be
известная
the marker
возможность
that people are just reconnoitering.
снять какую-то информацию о системе.
This is how a bad actor is trying to get some information about your system. Privileges changed.
Управление учетными записями
A very important correlation.
вне профиля. Для более корректной работы данного правила, конечно,
Illegitimate control over resources is control outside of a specific profile. Of course, you would need integration with various other systems to understand that privileges have changed.
правило на
One integrator, for example, has a rule that if there is an activity of a user who has not passed through the access control system into the building, this is illegitimate.
управление учетной записью, но так как мы говорим,
So you would have your own profiles
можно
connected to your accounts. But if we're talking about a legacy system, most legacy systems undergo minimal changes actually.
сначала настраивать,
Postgres, for example, you first set it up normally and then people log in.
DLP средствами SOC.
DLP through SOC.
Детектить слишком большие запросы, слишком
Here you can detect the biggest queries, the frequent queries, or just large numbers of queries.
однозначно легитимную активность. На
And after we profile and identify illegitimate activity,
путями
this is what we will see mostly. This is mostly we will see in the network. This will be marked as an attempt to exfiltrate.
это резервное копирование вне профиля.
Next.
Резервным копированием.
Unauthorized backup outside of the profile of the user again.
Интересно, на практике
Why is this an interesting proposal, we think?
такие действия.
Because
Вот, и, опять же,
many bad actors
всем
try to do it.
известный, понятный пример. Это
If you want a simple example, is data sync outside of a user's profile.
на нашей legacy-системе, с учетом того, что
And again,
это будет
if we have a legacy system that is not changing, any changes in the backup rules should be suspicious.
очистка событий информационной безопасности
Unauthorized changes,
и
like-
управление настройками, в том числе ИБ.
changes in settings, including InfoSec changes
На все
and cleanups.
системы, вот,
Of course, we recommend to
вероятно.
catch those events in all possible types of systems because this is very likely to be used.
В наши системы не поступают логи. На самом деле выход есть.
Not in profile. What if the system just doesn't generate the log?
Система, про которую мы на 100%
Of course, you might say that it is relevant for a system about which we know 100% it's not compromised yet. So we can scan such a system, create a snapshot,
сервисы сетевые
identify all the active network services,
профилировать по
monitor the network traffic, and then just compare it to a snapshot that we know 100% is legitimate.
два направления.
And there are two possible ways how you can do that.
Как я уже сказал, это сканирование,
Through the network, like you scan the network profile, you scan the traffic both ways, and
мы получаем порты
at least you will get the IP addresses and ports
сессии,
and the
NTA
volume of a session.
и сам трафик, который
If it's an NTA,
профилировать как
we get
если
even the characteristics of the traffic, and we can classify the traffic into good and bad. Now,
допустим, если к legacy
the
системе
second way is operational.
консоль,
If, for example, users can log in to a legacy system through a console or in any other way, we can profile illegitimate activity through dynamic lists.
предлагается,
And the simplest basic rule
консоли был,
that we suggest is to log that a console has started but not ended operation, or vice versa.
довольно сложный подход.
This is quite a complicated approach, we understand.
Что же мы в итоге можем мониторить, когда мы закрываем
Now,
систему через
as a result, what is it that we can really monitor if we try to cover such a system? We can identify a backdoor,
использование
we can identify a new scanning, using our system as a hub.
Ну, другие, скажем, активности, в любом случае, когда мы спрофилировали всю
And some other activities. Anyway, when we have profiled the entire set of activities going around our system,
довольно серьезное покрытие мы по мониторингу этой самой системы, потому что
so what you get as a result is quite a good coverage
не будут происходить,
of the
она необновляемая.
of the current system, again relying on the hypothesis that this is a legacy system, which means that it is not changing in the process of
И
monitoring. So here you can see what the threat searches and threat hunting could look like. It's very important again that people doing this should know as much as they can about their system.
через ханты мы это увидим.
For example, we can see through threat hunting that an accountant is trying to change connections between databases, but it may not be illegitimate activity. Maybe the accountant is doing that because there is an instruction from tech support.
Так в итоге что мы закрываем?
So, what do you get?
Как и планировали,
As a result.
мы закрываем 11-14 тактик, что составляет
So we cover 11 tactics out of 14, which is again a little bit less than 80%.
вот так.
That's it.
Да, при подключении источника
Yep.
важно
When
правильно
a
сформулировать
source is being connected to your system, it's very important to create the right query to start the audit,
threat-хантинга и
because you need to audit only the logs that we need for threat hunting and for setting up the correlation rules.
мы передаем их на CM, парсим и
We
составляем
then transfer them to RCM, we parse them, and then we use them for the threat hunting purposes. Now,
Ну, хотя бы потому, что
a couple of tips. Why TCP is better than UDP in this case? Because you're going to stitch together several events, and if you use UDP, this stitching just will not work.
гарантированно передача.
And of course, if you have TCP with guaranteed transfer, you get the events hierarchy. And if you get that right, and if you monitor this,
Потом
at least
скачка событий при неполадках на IT-инфраструктуре.
you will know
А во-вторых,
that you're not catching, for example, the
меняется на практике
increase in the number of events because of any other incident,
возможно, когда злоумышленник
and you can ensure that it is not
слушает
a
некие свои
false positive.
и создает засветку на определенный интерес.
So actually, it is a false positive from your side, but this could be just an attempt to illuminate your system by another attacker who is just sitting there and only listening.
В том числе для legacy-систем, то есть когда мы понимаем, что мониторить ее придется,
So you will have to monitor the source,
должны
but
определить
you've got to be very moderate here.
детекты,
Even for legacy systems, you need to only understand and use which audits are needed right now,
сложности.
but that doesn't mean that you won't have to find out everything about the system with time.
Будет опубликовано. Вот здесь
This is the table of detect complexity. I don't think I need to read it out to you because I will publish the presentation. It's kind of a guideline.
сложности написания там, какие правила просто написать, какие сложнее.
Which rules are the simplest, which rules are more complex, and so on.
Ситуация, что
If you have a really complex rule,
вот и совсем
that may depend very well on your architecture. And we have another table actually.
связанности, то есть какие именно поля, в каких именно событиях
The table of connectivity.
проговаривать
Which fields you need for which events for which rules. Again, the presentation will be published,
вопросы.
so I will not read it out to you. That's all from me. If you have any questions, please let me know.
Николай, коллеги, напоминаю,
Thanks, Nikolai.
лучший вопрос. Мы
Colleagues, again, we have a gift. I mean, the speaker gives books from Peter Publishers they are specialized in information security for the best question. So go ahead, please, with your questions. Hello.
Я понял, что мы смотрим метру, применимые техники.
So my understanding is that we look at Mitra, we look at all the applicable techniques and so on, but your focus is on events.
В какой момент стоит уходить?
That sounds nice, but have you ever thought
Или стоит ресурсы бросить на более
what is best, to try to cover legacy systems
на инфраструктуру, на базы,
or
на приложения? Вот, в общем, мой
concentrate your resources on applications, on databases, on infrastructure and so on?
detection engineering.
Have you ever thought about this?
Вопрос,
Thank you for the question.
вопрос довольно интересный, обсуждаемый. Здесь, мне кажется,
This is something that a lot of people discuss.
каждый руководитель определяет степень актуальности угроз,
And every CSO,
степень покрытия,
I think, would be in a position to
что он не
make a decision on which threats are most relevant to them,
Стоит покрыть
what they can see, what they can't see, and so on.
Enterprise.
I think
Сейчас работает.
the first thing to cover is your enterprise systems currently in operation.
Все уязвимости устранены, там все патчи накачаны.
So once you know that you have patched the system and there are no known, at least, vulnerabilities in the system,
Как бы
you can start using this.
что на вашей инфраструктуре
But sometimes
система
it may so happen that you have a legacy system in your infrastructure and this system operates critical business data. And whether we want it or not, you will have to cover it anyway.
по импортозамещению, и данная старая legacy-система, она может быть даже не отечественного вендора, как
And this old legacy system may come from a foreign vendor.
ваш вопрос.
This is the story of import substitution, of course. I hope I've answered your question. Any other questions, please?
Привет, такой вопрос.
Hi.
Не думали расширить список
Have you
уязвимостей в legacy-системах?
thought about
У меня был, мне кажется, кейс
improving
некоторых действительно
your list with detecting vulnerabilities in legacy systems?
уязвимости написать правила.
Because I think you can write the rules if you have identified the vulnerability before the attack actually happens.
Просто предлагаю некий
Thank you for the question. Well, this slide deck and this talk is about a systemic approach. So you take the tables after the last slide and you actually try to apply it, including to vulnerabilities, to understand which vulnerabilities you may have to cover. You need to know at least something about your system. Some things are obvious.
мониторинг.
Some are not. And if you want to start monitoring quickly,
Поэтому это
you very rarely know which vulnerabilities are the most relevant. So this is a good question, but a best answer is offline.
Да, есть еще.
We have another question in the end of the room. Thank you for the talk.
Мониторинг в основном, да, опять же, на профилировании, не перекрывает ли тогда этот вектор
Your monitoring
уеба?
is based on profiles, but you will have to cross paths with UEVA systems.
Через корреляцию, а не через уеба.
So why do you only concentrate on analyzing attacks through correlations, not through UEVAs?
скорее философский вопрос. Как вам удобнее, так
Well, that is a philosophical question, actually. If that is convenient to you, if you're comfortable with this,
сложно
you
сказать.
can start monitoring in any way. So I don't think I have a good answer.
Давайте примем еще один вопрос.
Okay, we have time for another question. Yes, colleagues, go ahead, please.
Спасибо большое за доклад.
Thank you.
Вопрос навеян последними слайдами.
My question comes from your last slides with all those tables with fields and so on. Did you
По наличию логов, например, используя LLM, да,
Did you do it like this? For example, you have some logs and you use only the logs from OLMs to create a logical structure of a correlation rule,
листу, да, какому-то, который...
so that we don't cover the entire checklist.
Был ли у вас такой опыт и
So have you ever done this?
есть ли идея в этом?
And do you have any ideas whether this is feasible at all?
Сейчас плохо расслышал. Вы спросили про
Let me clarify.
LM.
Да,
You have asked about LMs.
Нет, через LM таких
No.
я не прогонял.
I have never done trying to run those logs through LMs because I think
Тем более мы сами
it's hard to train an adequate model for a legacy system. Even humans don't know
пока важнее опыт. Ну, для первоначального
what will work and what won't. I think it is feasible. I have never done this, but well, I think that why not? But I think expertise is much more important in this case. Thank you, Nikolai. Let's thank the presenter.
Выбери, пожалуйста, лучший вопрос.
So, Nikolai, can you choose the best question?
Который был издалека, да?
Yes, the question from the back of the room, you mean?
Второй вопрос, коллеги. Кто задает?
Second question. Who was actually asking this second question in this room? Just own up.
Да, про уязвимость.
Yeah, about vulnerabilities. Very good. Thank you, and let's thank